Hello. I'm making a video, spending a little time talking about the concepts that I discuss in this lesson in Lampadia, relating to the self, the soul, the shadow, the ego, the psyche, the persona. So many terms to throw around. And it can be very overwhelming, sometimes confusing to navigate these labels that a psychologist affix to different pieces of the self, or our experience of who we are. The great Carl Jung wrote so much about the self and understanding our place. And one of the key shifts that we have as we get deeper into our wholeness is that we understand that we are both the perceiver and the actor, that we are living our life and doing what we do, having our experiences, relationships, going to work, taking this course, etc., so on and so on, that there is something within us, someone within us who is watching the show. That is our outer life. So it gets to this juncture, this crossroads, where our awareness shifts, that we are no longer just living in ego, so when we live in ego, we don't have a sense of the deeper self that is the one watching the surface self. There is just, we don't entertain that we are having thoughts. We are our thoughts. We don't see that our actions, our emotions, and so on are a choice that we make. We feel that they just happen to us. And fundamentally, as we get deeper into Hecate's cave and start to really feel the illumination of those torches of hers and be cracked open to the soul within us, to our potential, to all of how powerful we are, that as we progress into this journey, there is a natural consequence that we make this shift away from just being ego to being aware of ego, being aware of shadow. And we also become more aware of our personas. So personas are roles that we play. They're like outfits that we put on to do a certain thing, that a certain aspect of our life, that help us to navigate the outer world. Personas can become really cumbersome. They can become too much. They can become things that really constrain us. Like in the lesson I write about, it's like being a child stuffed into a snowsuit that's way too small. And then what happens is, when we get closer to that torch of Hecate, which really amplifies our own inner fire, it gets very, very hot in that snowsuit, which is too small. We get very uncomfortable, and we want to take it off because the cave is the perfect temperature. It's we're going to be safe in the cave. We don't need the snowsuit anymore. So you can think of personas like that, but personas aren't always like that too small snowsuit. Sometimes personas are really fabulous. The persona that we put on, for example, as mother, if you're a mother to someone, that's a really nourishing and wonderful persona that we may put on. Although it can also be too small at times too. So there is always this navigation that we're going through with the personas that we put on. Um, and until we shift, until that fire cracks us open enough that we see that we are so much more than persona, that we are kind of enchanted by them and we don't see our totality. And you may remember, when we go into the cave for the first time, we do this mirror experience where we see our totality. And that totality is all of those personas we put on, whatever it is: wife, daughter, brother, sister, partner, worker, all those personas that we put on. We see them all, and yet we are the one seeing them. We are not any one of those things. There is the watcher self, the deeper self, the self, I am all these things, yet they are not me. It is this kind of shift, fundamental shift, that as you go deeper into the medicine of the goddess, you will start to perceive your roles. And you'll also start to perceive your shadow aspects, which is so challenging when we're first becoming aware, that we have wounds that are very deep, that we have ways of being in the world that are often the result of spiritual programming and invalidation. And we have all these things in our own shadowy darkness within us that we're healing and integrating into our wholeness. Thinking back to that mirror, the shadow is part of that mirror, yet the shadow is not us either, because the shadow doesn't see the mirror, the soul sees the mirror, right? We see the mirror from that deeper self with a capital S in Jungian psychology. Sometimes you'll see this self soul called different terms like higher self, or the ascended self. There's many different terms that you'll see used to describe it. In analytic psychology and other areas of psychology, the soul is often referred to as the psyche. Parts of the psyche, or parts of the soul, are more available to our consciousness. And that's really our focus here in lesson 3, is like the conscious landscape, the mind screen, what we can call forward. And we can call forward an analysis of the persona, an analysis of the shadow self. We can call forward how we interact in these various roles of ours, and gain some illumination into how we are so much more than those things, and how we can interact with these aspects of ourself, including the ego, which is like the most surface self, how we can interact with them from a deeper space, from that well within us. The very transformative experience of going into the self, turning inward, brings the torch to these different aspects of ourselves. So don't get overly caught up in the terminology, although it is really helpful to understand the concepts that we have, like an ego or a surface self. We have a shadow, which are the parts of ourselves that lurk in the darkness. We have personas, which are roles that we play. And then we have a deeper self, a psyche, a soul, that largely functions outside of consciousness, but comes into consciousness in ways, and we bring it more into consciousness by shifting that perception towards the lens of the deeper self and away from the ego. And you'll know it's happening when you are having dialogues with yourself about things, and you may have already started doing this. Like, you may have already started talking to your shadow, for example, and saying, like, well, Shadow Cindy, I really don't think there's any need to have a panic attack over this relatively minor event, but I appreciate your heightened sense of danger, attunement, that you're looking for danger. You're doing that vigilance thing, which, the vigilance is an aspect of the torch too, right? So you can see that. And then maybe you say, okay, well, Shadow, go back on your silent throne, and so on. And then we can entertain with our roles, so teacher Cindy, for example, do you have your notes ready, and all these things, and you can start to see these roles and have dialogues with those roles, um, because they're all part of your inner committee. And developing your own inner committee about aspects of yourself is a really foundational tool for healing into wholeness and for expanding your inner life, so that you're not so focused on the ego lens, because the ego lens is where gossip abides. It's where, like so and so, it's having this fabulous thing happen to them. Why not me? It's, all these things that we're just getting into these spirals. Well, so and so said this, or, so and so did this to me. And that's the ego is really going to be preoccupied with those things that are very kind of surface and shallow. When those things happen, which they will, we live a life, and life is inherently chaotic and has twists and turns that none of us can control. That when you shift this perspective away from the ego self to the deeper self, you can see, oh, this is happening. And what is it I need? Do I need to hold space for my feeling self, my emotions, and have some time there? Do I need to allow the shadow to say what she would do in this situation? Listen to her, hear her out, and then say, thank you very much. I'm going to use, the skills that I've gained to not react that way, but you've been heard, and so on. Or what role would I take on, to tackle this situation? And it also shifts the gaze away from thinking things that aren't truly important are actually very important. And that is because the soul sees things differently than the ego. The ego is like, now, give it to me. I need a quick fix. I need, that instant positive reinforcement. I need to look fabulous on social media. I need to have the latest gadget. These are all things that the ego gets very preoccupied with, because it inhabits that shallow space that is the interface with shallow culture. And so when we shift away from that and we're like, hey, ego, I understand, that you really want those new shoes. I'm going to think about it and see if we do actually really want those new shoes. So you can see how this starts to shift the internal dialogue. And as a technique from a psychological perspective, this really will reduce anxiety, depression, distress. It will help you cope with situations, and go in and say, hey, the shadow tends to avoid things. Do I really want to avoid this situation? Or do I want to bring, the kind of boss self to this situation, and I need to be kind of maybe the Queen of Swords? And it's also helpful to really understand archetypes better as you get into this dialogue and this appreciation, this dance with your inner committee, because we are all comprised of archetypes. But perhaps the archetype that is the most fundamental in our lives and is most instrumental in our healing and becoming whole is the mother archetype, or the mother complex for many of us. So complexes in depth psychology are constellations of attributes, traits, behaviors, that become fixes, complexes in our mind. They become almost, in terms of spiritual work, they are spirits onto themselves. So there is the larger mother archetype, that even though your mother and my mother might look and act very differently, we both understand that they inhabit the mother archetype. And based on our experiences with our individual mothers, we develop mother complexes. And one of the fundamental tasks of the journey of wholeness is to resolve and to enter into, with curiosity and wholeheartedness, an understanding of our mother complex, so that we're no longer bound with it. So the mother complex can be really connected to our shadow selves, and our ego selves. And what we want to do is start to explain who we are in relation to the mother complex, child of so and so and so and so, this is what they were like, and this is what my upbringing was like, and this is what they mean to me. And so that's just a little bit of an example of a mother complex. We have many other complexes. We can have complexes about our romantic partners, complexes about our boss, and these complexes inhabit archetype. And archetypes are these foundational spirits upon which the whole universe is built. If you are, for example, a daughter, like I am, you are part of the daughter archetype. What does it mean to be a daughter? And what does that look like for me? And deciding whether or not this role that is part of an archetype, the role of daughter, is one that is going to hold space in your inner committee, or is it something that you're going to relinquish, at least, for a temporary period? So this is just starting to explore archetypal psychology and what it means to you. Another tip I want to say before we finish this little video class of ours is that journaling and writing about your experiences as you go into explorations of your inner world is really, really foundational. I also really encourage you to get with a deck of cards. We use the Wild Unknown archetypal cards in the Soul School because they contain, a collection of the major archetypes, and they're really helpful. You can sit and study those cards and explore what ones you feel called to on an intuitive level, what ones really do describe the personas you take on, and what ones really describe aspects of your deeper self. I made a video a while ago called The Archetype of the Witch. And so the archetype of the witch as, the one who walks between worlds. And for many of us, that is the space we inhabit, is this medial woman, the medium. We have so many different names for this in contemporary society, the psychic, the seer, sometimes called light workers, sometimes called, I think, indigo children or violet children is another one that I've heard. So many different terms that we might use to kind of describe who we are. And, this role, particularly for women, but also for men and other genders, has been around for as long as there has been humanity. And, sometimes I wax poetic about this. And like I wrote in Entering Hecate's Garden about, the mother created the world, and then she created us, and then the humans. That because we are so dialed into the deeper world, because we can read the energy signatures of others and so on, that this is something that sets us apart from those who don't have this kind of mediality. And mediality is a huge gift that comes with a price. And I want to talk about this now in this video, talking about aspects of the self and how we can engage with ourselves in a deeper way through archetypes. I want to talk about this archetype of the medium, which is the term that's used a lot of times in depth psychology, or you'll see the medial woman used as well. We have so many words for it. It's because it is a very tricky thing to pin down. And because we live in such a rational world right now, and over the past several hundred years, we've lived in this space, that what happened is that the medial one, the one who inhabits the spaces in between, can speak with spirits, is dialed into their dreams, has visions perhaps of Hekate that come across their imagination, senses things that others don't, and so on. That because this has been so relegated, to being crazy, or it's not taken seriously, we have a lot to unpack around our own mediality. So it's a good time as we're getting into the third lesson to start to explore your mediality. And that's why I included, visions of Hecate and symbols of Hecate in this lesson on illumination, because it's time to start that dance, not only the dance with the self, but also the dance with symbols and the dance with visions and that bigger dance of the psyche that is tapped into the collective, is tapped into the unseen world. And holding space for that and overcoming that spiritual programming that says these things are less than or suspicious or sinful, et cetera, et cetera. You know how this goes. Um, that is a process that takes time, and it's going to be a journey you go through the whole rest of this course. And I've included, if you go a little bit deeper into this lesson, you'll see a couple of other practices, a couple of a talisman that you can create to help you bring in your inner committee of other torchbearers. So, your goddesses and whoever you want to work with, Hecate and so on. Maybe you've got ancestors that you want on this inner committee of yours. It can also be different aspects of yourself. And then to also start to create your own torch of creation, which are the aspects of yourself that are in shadow, but that they are desired. They're like our forgotten dreams, our aspects of ourselves that we used to be, we used to love to dance, for example, and we've forgotten how to dance. So the shadow contains these things as well. So as we move into our mediality, which is a huge part of our totality, there is no journey to wholeness until we accept that we are medial, that we can inhabit both worlds and neither, and that the true medicine comes from the unseen world, the world of the goddess as a force, as spirit, and so on. That's where it's born, and that's what's wrong with our society today, is this denial of this. So this is a lot. Start to create your torch of creation. Start to engage with the dialogue within yourself, and shifting that perspective is really going to make a difference in how you experience the outer world. Keep with the meditation, of course, because that really strengthens that deeper self and helps to bring it more into our consciousness.